Or do you esteem as being of little account this truly valuable tolerance he is exercising towards you in all forbearance and patience? If you do, it is because you fail to realize that it is this very tolerance of God that is leading you to, that is, giving you the opportunity for, repentance. Romans 2:4. And consider the Lord's patience towards you as leading to your salvation, just as also our beloved brother Paul has written to you, according to the wisdom given to him. 2 Peter 3:15. God's great patience, God's great provision, God's great love and desire for the human race of that time to turn to him was, in the event, despised, forcing the issue of his terrifying judgment. Only after it has been demonstrated for all to see that, in spite of extraordinary patience and provision, the human race had become irredeemably corrupt, did the deluge begin. That judgment, of course, was a total one, exterminating not only all of polluted mankind, but all lesser creatures as well, leaving not even a hint of pollution by association to survive. But God does not blot out the righteous with the wicked. One man had turned to God, and so by his righteousness, the righteousness imputed by God to those who turn to him, Genesis 15:6, stood in the gap for our entire race. Genesis 6:8-10, Noah. But Noah had found favor in the Lord's eyes. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, and perfect in his generations, that is, of pure human seed. Noah, moreover, made a habit of walking with God. Moreover, Noah was the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. In stark contrast to his contemporaries who wanted nothing whatsoever to do with God, Noah aggressively pursued a relationship with him, seeking him, finding him, following him, and finally coming to serve him in the unique way for which he is now so famous. This attitude of responding to God in all that he initiated gained for Noah God's favor, a treasure more valuable than anything else on earth, and still to be sought in the very same way. Noah was not of mixed seed. His purely human pedigree is the point behind the Hebrew phrase tamim haya b'dhorothaiv, perfect in his generations. This fact, it is true, redounds to the glory of his parents and forefathers who did not succumb to the temptation of intermarrying with the semi-angelic seed. But Noah had also in his own right forsaken this disastrous course at a time when, due to the intensification of evil mentioned in context and the spread of the angelic strain to nearly all of the human race, such intermarriage must have been more difficult to avoid than ever before. God honored Noah's steadfastness, providing a wife for him of equally pure human stock, and blessing them with 3 boys born during the final 120 years before the flood, for whom God would provide acceptable spouses as well. We can only guess the degree to which Noah was ridiculed, ostracized, and threatened for such stubborn aloofness. But for anyone who truly sought and followed God, the alternative course of action would have been unthinkable. So clearly and obviously would it have violated the natural law of God. By resisting the temptations of his day, and by persistently following after God wherever he led, Noah became prepared for the ministry God had in turn prepared for him, that is, to stand in the gap for the entire human race. Now it was through the ark that God chose to effect the physical deliverance of that remnant of the human race from which we all derive, that is, Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and their 3 wives. But it was Noah, after all, who built the ark, and that fact is far more important in God's eyes than any wooden structure ever could be. God, of course, could have plucked this family from the rising waters through any number of miraculous means. Instead, he chose to make use of Noah's faith and faithfulness. Given the mammoth nature of the task, it must have taken Noah the better part of the 120-year grace period that preceded the flood to build this vessel capable of containing not only himself and his family, but a remnant of all the world's animal population as well. And while it is this fabulous structure which has captured the attention of posterity since that time, the really amazing part of the story is that Noah persisted at this seemingly impossible task, day after day and decade after decade, sticking faithfully to the charge that God had given him. We can scarcely imagine the opposition and active discouragement he encountered from the world for this faithful dedication to the Lord's command, but in the end, God vindicated Noah, his preacher of righteousness, 2 Peter 2:5, and his work of witness to God, and did so in the most dramatic possible way. It is interesting and important to note that although in our own discussions of such things it is scarcely possible to say the name Noah without mentioning the ark in the same breath, yet in the frequent references to Noah in the Bible, following the Genesis account of the flood, the ark is generally not even discussed. The exceptions are 1 Peter 3:20, where the mention is not substantive, and Hebrews 11:7, where the focus is upon Noah's reverent response to God's command in building it. The reason for this is obvious enough. The ark and the animals 2 by 2 are the parts of the story that impress human beings. But God was impressed by Noah's heart, by Noah's faithfulness. It was as a result of this previously proven character that Noah was chosen to build that most famous vessel as a means of deliverance not only from the coming flood, but also from the perverse generation that had made the deluge a necessity. 1 Peter 3:20. They were saved through the water, that is, brought safely through it, and so delivered from the threat of that generation. Genesis 11:13, divine judgment and divine deliverance. Now the earth was ruined before God, because the earth was filled with wrongful violence. For God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was ruined, because all flesh had ruined its way of life upon the earth. Then God said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with wrongful violence on their account. So behold, I am about to ruin them completely along with the earth." The continual evil in the collective thinking of mankind that had attended the permeation of the angelic strain throughout the human gene pool had produced a deadly side effect that made the destruction of the antediluvian civilization an absolute necessity. That is, a culture of wrongful violence. Hebrew, chamas. Intimidation, it would certainly seem, will have been an additional factor in the rapid disintegration of the pure human stock, making Noah's determination to keep himself and his family pure all the more noteworthy and commendable. Since this endemic violence had essentially compromised the principle of free will, and since the mixed population of that time had universally rejected God, despite the witness of impending judgment given by the construction of Noah's ark, God determined upon an equally complete destruction of them and their world by means of a flood which the Bible takes pains to show was universal in nature, Genesis 7:17 through 24. Thus ended Satan's first major counterattack, an assault which came within a single family of accomplishing its goal, though with God, the most slender thread is an unbreakable bond. Deprived of its fabulous trappings, this direct angelic interference in human affairs was essentially an attack on human freedom, beginning with overwhelming temptation and ending with overwhelming violence. Following the destruction of the earth and the mixed seed that had resulted from this gambit, all the fallen angels directly involved in human procreation were imprisoned in the abyss, a fearful prospect for these creatures of light, and no like design has been attempted since on any scale, large or small. Satan's post-Diluvian attack on human freedom, the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:1 through 9. The devil's second major counterattack focused entirely upon the issue of human freedom. For Satan was, and is, well aware that short of destroying the human race, outright or through genetic pollution, the best way to stop mankind from turning to God is to compromise our ability, our freedom to do so. The Tower of Babel incident occurred at least 100 years after the Great Flood, as we know from the naming of Peleg. Compare Genesis 10:25 with Genesis 5:32 and 11:10 through 16. By this time, the family of Noah had expanded rapidly. The descriptions given in Genesis chapters 10 and 11 paint a picture of a post-flood population boom progressing at a pace beyond anything the world had yet seen, a fact no doubt attributable at least in part to the decreasing lifespan and consequent shortening of generational intervals.